In 1861, a wealthy socialite in Washington, D.C. hid a tiny coded message inside the elaborate hairdo of a young woman and sent her walking straight through Union lines. That message reached Confederate General P.G.T. Beauregard just days before the First Battle of Bull Run, and it changed the outcome of the entire battle. Thousands of Union soldiers were routed. The North was humiliated. And when federal agents finally traced the leak, they found it came from a 44-year-old widow who had been hosting dinner parties for Union generals, senators, and cabinet members, sometimes all in the same week. Her name was Rose O'Neal Greenhow, and she was just one of a hidden army of women who operated in the shadows of the Civil War. Women who seduced generals, broke out of prisons, disguised themselves as men, pretended to be insane, and in some cases, gave their lives, all in the name of espionage. This is the story that your history class never told you. Before the war, Rose O'Neal Greenhow was one of the most well-connected women in Washington, D.C. She moved in elite political circles. She dined with presidents. She counted senators, diplomats, and military officers among her closest friends. And when the southern states began to secede, Rose made a quiet decision. She would use every one of those connections to serve the Confederacy. She built a spy ring right in the heart of the Union capital. Her network included government clerks, military officers, and other society women, people who could pass along troop movements, battle plans, and political intelligence without raising suspicion. Her most famous act came in July of 1861. Rose had obtained critical intelligence about Union General Irvin McDowell's plan to march on the Confederate Army near Manassas, Virginia. She encoded the message into a cipher and gave it to a young courier named Betty Duval, who wove it into her long, dark hair and rode through Union checkpoints on horseback, posing as a simple country girl. The message reached General Beauregard in time for him to prepare his forces and call for reinforcements. The result was the First Battle of Bull Run, a shocking Confederate victory that sent the Union Army fleeing back to Washington in chaos. Confederate President Jefferson Davis himself later sent Rose a message, "But for you, there would have been no Battle of Bull Run." It didn't take long for the Union to catch on. Alan Pinkerton, the famous detective, was assigned to investigate her. She was placed under house arrest and then imprisoned in the old Capitol Prison in Washington. But even from behind bars, Rose kept spying. She smuggled messages out using couriers and coded letters. Eventually, the Union gave up trying to contain her and deported her to the Confederacy in 1862. She then traveled to Europe as a Confederate diplomat, meeting with Queen Victoria and Napoleon III, lobbying for foreign support. But Rose's story ends in tragedy. In October of 1864, she was returning from Europe aboard a blockade runner off the coast of North Carolina. When a Union gunboat gave chase, Rose insisted on going ashore in a small rowing boat. The boat capsized in rough waters. She was dragged under by the weight of gold coins she was carrying, payment from her book royalties and diplomatic work, sewn into her undergarments. She drowned at the age of 49. She was buried with full Confederate military honors in Wilmington, North Carolina. Her tombstone reads, "A bearer of dispatches to the Confederate government." Now, if Rose Greenhow was the Confederacy's greatest female spy, then her Union counterpart may have been even more daring. Elizabeth Van Lew was born into a wealthy slaveholding family in Richmond, Virginia, the capital of the Confederacy. She had been educated in Philadelphia, where she developed strong abolitionist views. When the war broke out, she found herself living in the heart of enemy territory, and she made a decision that would put her life at risk every single day for 4 years. Elizabeth began visiting Union prisoners held in Richmond's notorious Libby prison. She brought them food, medicine, and books. But she was also doing something far more dangerous. She was smuggling information out. She debriefed captured Union soldiers about Confederate troop positions and defenses, then passed that intelligence north through an elaborate network of couriers and safe houses that stretched from Richmond all the way to the Union lines. But here's where Elizabeth showed true genius. She knew that a wealthy woman openly sympathizing with the Union cause would quickly find herself arrested or worse. So she crafted a disguise that no one would suspect. She began acting erratically in public. She muttered to herself. She wore mismatched clothing. She wandered through the streets singing and talking to no one. The people of Richmond began calling her Crazy Bet. And it worked. Her neighbors dismissed her as a harmless eccentric. Confederate officials decided she was too unstable to be a threat. All the while, she was running one of the most effective spy rings of the entire war. One of her most remarkable moves involved a formerly enslaved woman named Mary Jane Richards, sometimes referred to in historical accounts as Mary Bowser. According to the traditional account, Elizabeth had helped educate Mary Jane and then managed to place her as a servant in the Confederate White House, the home of Jefferson Davis himself. Mary Jane reportedly gathered intelligence by overhearing conversations and observing documents, passing what she learned back through Van Lew's network. While some of the specific details of Mary Jane's activities have been debated by historians, partly because Van Lew destroyed many of her own records after the war to protect her sources, the broader story of their collaboration is widely accepted by Civil War scholars. When Union forces finally captured Richmond in April of 1865, Elizabeth Van Lew was one of the first people to raise the American flag over the city. General Ulysses S. Grant personally visited her home and called her intelligence the most valuable received from Richmond during the war. But her story doesn't have a happy ending either. After the war, Grant appointed her postmaster of Richmond as a reward for her service, but her neighbors never forgave her. She was shunned, ostracized, and socially destroyed. She spent her final years in poverty, largely forgotten. When she died in 1900, the only people who paid for her tombstone were the families of Union soldiers she had helped save. Families from Massachusetts who had never forgotten what she did.
On the other side of the war, one of the Confederacy's most colorful spies was barely old enough to vote, if women had been allowed to vote at all. Belle Boyd was just 17 years old when the war began. She lived in Martinsburg, Virginia, now West Virginia, and her career in espionage started with a gunshot. When Union soldiers occupied her town and one of them forced his way into her home, reportedly cursing and threatening her mother, Belle pulled out a pistol and shot him. The soldier died. A military inquiry cleared her of wrongdoing, ruling it justifiable. But that incident lit a fire in Belle Boyd. She began flirting with Union officers to extract military secrets, then passing those secrets to Confederate commanders. She was bold to the point of recklessness. During the 1862 Valley Campaign, she reportedly ran across open ground under artillery fire to deliver intelligence directly to General Stonewall Jackson about Union troop dispositions in the town of Front Royal. Jackson's forces won the engagement, and he personally thanked her, making her an honorary aide-de-camp. Belle was arrested multiple times, at least twice, and imprisoned. She was only 21 when she was sent to Europe on a Confederate mission. In a twist that sounds like it belongs in a novel, the Union ship that intercepted her vessel was commanded by a young officer named Samuel Hardinge. They fell in love. He let her escape, They married in England. Hardinge was court-martialed by the Union for his actions. After the war, Belle became an actress and touring lecturer, dramatically retelling her wartime exploits on stage until her death in 1900. No account of Civil War espionage would be complete without one final name, a woman most people know for the Underground Railroad, but almost no one knows as a military spy. Harriet Tubman didn't just free enslaved people before the war. During the war, she served as a scout, spy, and military leader for the Union Army in South Carolina. In June of 1863, Harriet Tubman helped plan and lead the Combahee River Raid, a military operation that struck deep into Confederate territory along the Combahee River. Union gunboats, guided by intelligence that Tubman and her network of local informants had gathered, destroyed Confederate supplies, set plantations ablaze, and liberated over 700 enslaved people in a single night. It was the first military raid in American history, planned and led by a woman. A headline in the Wisconsin State Journal reported on the event with the matter-of-fact words, "Harriet Tubman, Colonel Montgomery and his gallant band of 300 black soldiers, under the guidance of a black woman, dashed into the enemy's country." Despite all of this, Tubman was paid barely anything for her service. She struggled financially for the rest of her life and didn't receive a government pension until more than 30 years after the war ended, and even then, it was originally granted as a widow's pension for her husband's service, not her own. Rose Greenhow, Elizabeth Van Lew, Belle Boyd, Harriet Tubman, Mary Jane Richards. These women operated in an era when they couldn't vote, couldn't hold office, and were expected to stay silent. Instead, they ran spy networks, outsmarted generals, broke out of prisons, led military raids, and shaped the outcome of the bloodiest war in American history. They did it without uniforms, without recognition, and in most cases, without ever appearing in the history books that came after. The Civil War wasn't just fought on battlefields. It was fought in parlors, in prisons, in kitchens, and in the streets of enemy capitals, by women who understood that sometimes the most powerful weapon in a war is being underestimated. If you found this story fascinating, subscribe and hit the bell, because history is full of stories like this that nobody ever told you. Drop a comment and let me know, which of these women do you think was the most daring? I'll see you in the next one.